Let's give a warm Pennsylvania Leadership Conference welcome to Congressman Scott Perry.
Thank you very much. Hey, Lohman's great. I can tell you, he stole some of my thunder, and because I talked to him earlier, I said, look, we're going to talk about a treasurer's race so many years ago, I can't even remember how many, but then he introduced me to his son, that when he announced for that treasurer's race, he was bottle feeding his son on his lap, so that's how long ago it's been. And so I want to thank Lohman. Our past together, I'll tell you what, has really been remarkable for me, because a lot of the things I learned about campaigning and, more importantly, about conservative principles came from Lohman. I want to thank all of you for coming out here. It's it's Friday. It's a work day. Many of you folks are people pulling the wagon, so to take off from that and come out here and just make sure that you're thinking correctly and thinking right, and checking up on your elected officials. It's a burden and it's a sacrifice, and we appreciate you making it. I also want to talk a little bit about the value of the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference. This is where we kind of corral our ideas and check on each other and share some things and make sure that we're operating on the same page. And and as a person who has visited on many occasions over many years, not only as an elected official, but just like one of you, a concerned citizen, this is a great training ground. And it's important that we train our future leaders, because whether you're working at the township level or at the state level, at some point many of those folks have an opportunity to move up and represent. And the things that they learn here and along the way are going to guide them in how they lead us in the future. And many of you folks are here doing just that, so thank you for that. Lohman said I should communicate a little bit of the conservative message, and boy, don't we need some of that in America today. I hate it when the other side takes a word, a beautiful word, and ruins it, but I think that all of us we have a vision of balance in America, and we are so unbalanced, right? The left has taken over, and the effects of liberalism, what they've done to our country, it just makes us concerned every single day and every single night. I think of it as a lack of personal accountability and responsibility and a lack of standards, and that's what's really there are so many examples. I want to just tell you about some of them that I think of. They're large and they're small. I just heard recently, we have laws in this country that you're supposed to pay your bill, right? You don't walk into a store and just take something out and walk out and not pay for it. But yet in Massachusetts, some folks showed up, some young people in school showed up for the school lunch program. And they didn't have any credit on their card and they didn't have any money, so the person that administers the program turned them away. It seems like the right thing to do, taking money from the taxpayer, giving it to, I know it's a child, and see, that's where we get caught up in this thing, but the person that did the right thing ended up having to apologize, and that's one of the small things. How about, we have a First Amendment, so we're allowed to say things that are on our mind, political speech in particular, no matter how uncomfortable, yet in Colorado, you can't show photographs of aborted fetuses. Could show photographs of all kinds of other things, and I think you know what I'm talking about, but that's something that is so reprehensible to some folks that we can't show it, but it tells a story that needs to be told. We got 12 million people unemployed in this country, 14 million on Social Security disability. It's going bankrupt. That program's going bankrupt in 3 years. There's not a word said about it, not a word. 49 million people in poverty, and we spent $15 trillion. So the big and the small, there's no consequence to anything. We're $17 trillion in debt, and as conservatives, as linear thinkers, if you will, we understand the consequences of that. We are students of history, so we're $17 trillion in debt, and just a month or so ago, we heard that China and Australia approved using something other than the dollar as their trading currency. And that has very profound implications, because whoever is the reserve currency holder, whoever holds the standard in the world, has always been the powerful country, whether it was Portugal, Spain, England, and so on and so forth. But we also know that the course runs about 100 years, because once they go from one standard, like the gold standard, to a currency standard of printable money, it's about 100 years until they screw it up like we have done, print a bunch of money, get ourselves into debt, and then lose that position. And once you lose that position, we, America, can see ourselves going by the wayside like these other great nations of the past have done. And we see it with our eyes wide open. And we're doing it with our eyes wide open and not doing a thing about it. And that is the consequence. That is one of the consequences of liberalism, in my opinion. You know, this president talks about balancing our society, the have-nots with the haves, and so on and so forth. Really? You know, he turns little things into big things and disregards the huge things. So I'm looking, and it was mentioned earlier today, this trial in Philadelphia with Kermit Gosnell. All right? Not a word from the president. These women were disadvantaged women in Philadelphia that had nowhere else to turn to. And they went to this gentleman, well, this man, for care, thinking that this is the standard in America. You know, not only that, but the guy had a separate room for white women. I guarantee you, if this was an eye doctor in any town in America that had 2 rooms, one for blacks and Asians or what have you, and one room for white people, oh boy, look out. And rightly so, but not a word from the president. And not only not a word from the president, not a word from the sycophant media who upholds his agenda at every single turn. These are the consequences. We worry about the status of foreign terrorists at Gitmo. You know, we want to bring them to trial and give them American rights and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, not a word about the people that lost their lives in Benghazi. Not a word for our own American citizens who lost their lives on our border. Nothing. You know, thank you. We strive to bring folks in from all around the world because we are a country of immigrants. And then, and part of the policy narrative is that we need these folks because we are declining in birth rates, and we need these folks to do our work and to pay our bills and to uphold Social Security and pay taxes and so on and so forth. 50 million babies since the early 70s, 50 million babies lost, and not a word. Not a word. That's what I mean. It seems like everything is upside down. Now, so what does that mean to us as conservatives? Because we've heard all kinds of things about we've lost the message and we can't connect with people and so on and so forth. And you know, and of course, what we got to be careful is that rhetoric is coming from our enemies, all right? So we got to do our own research. We got to be careful, but we have to connect with people, each one of us. And I have this little theory that I've been kind of just thinking to myself as I go through things. I, like many of you, I characterize myself as a linear thinker. So here is the problem. Here are the facts. I look at the facts, and I come up with a solution. And once I have a solution, that determines my opinion on the issue. And so we try and transmute that to every other single person that we talk to, and we think that they think the way that we do. Now, I can tell you, when I went, for instance, when I went to Iraq, and you know, I had soldiers that would go outside the wire, and they'd say, well, we can just talk to Iraqi man or woman so-and-so because they have families and they think, generally speaking, just like we do. And I said, oh, they do not think just like we do. Anybody that, you know, I've got 2 beautiful little children that are just they are the light in my life. And the thought of telling my child to strap some explosive on and do anything in that regard is just beyond my imagination. Yet these folks, it's somewhat commonplace. Not only do they strap it on themselves, and these people do not think like we do, and I would guarantee you, in my mind anyhow, that there are many folks in America who do not think like you do. So what does that mean? You have to take a different approach. I think we are thinking than feeling, but I think that they are feeling than thinking. It's not bad. It's not bad. It is just different. So with that, I think we have to find a different way to reach out to those folks. What we also know, I think, is that there's a new paradigm. All right, folks today don't necessarily care about the future like you and I might, because we always say, well, you got to do this for the future of the country, for the future of your children, your grandchildren. People today, young people especially, are living in the here and now. Many of them are living in the here and now. So where you can connect with the ones that are worrying about the future as they should be, you're probably losing half of them, and we need to find a way to connect with the ones that care about the here and now. They don't care about history. They don't care about the big numbers because there's been no consequence. I sat, just like you did 6 years ago, and watched California, Illinois, and so many other states in our own nation go into default, and we thought, there will be a day of reckoning. It's coming, and we can't wait to see it come because we want some accountability. We want it to be reconciled. Well, where are we now? We're 6 years later. They've defaulted. They're, you know, if you thought some of the eastern states were in bad shape, these are billions and billions of dollars in debt, and there's been no consequence. So why would we think that voters think there's any consequence to the things we do or don't do? So, you know, the big numbers don't matter to them. I'll tell you what they want to know. They want to know that we care. They want to know, and of course we care. I've got, you know, a mother and a wife and 2 little girls, a family. I got a mother that's on Social Security and Medicare, a father that's in a stepdad that's in a nursing home, and I'm concerned about my family and my neighborhood and my country, just like every other American. But somehow, sometimes that is lost in how we deliver the message. They want to know that we have solutions. All right? And I think we do. We do have solutions. We have to articulate those solutions and why we stand for them. We need to talk with them, not at them. And I think a lot of times, because we are linear thinkers, because things make obvious sense to us, here's the problem, here are the facts, here's the solution, it's easy to talk to people. We need to talk with people. And it's important to be honest, because we are not going to agree on everything. As a matter of fact, my lovely bride and I, I put her through her paces, right? I mean, first of all, I knew she had to be a conservative or it would never worked out for me. She had to get through a couple campaigns, and she did, and then I finally asked her if she would stay with me. But that doesn't mean that we don't have disagreements, and even so, it usually means she wins anyhow. But we got to be honest with each other, and not just the person that you're raising your children with or sharing your dinner with, but the people that you're discussing things with at the checkout counter and or online. Be honest and stand on your principles. People won't always agree with you, and you won't always agree with them, but I guarantee you they will respect you, and they will respect us, and that's what all leaders have to do. And it's especially important for us conservative leaders because we're seen as mean and uncaring. We need to stand on our principles and make it relevant to each person in their home and in their life. You know, my mom comes to me and she says, "What are you going to do about Social Security? You know, I'm on Social Security, I'm counting on it." I said, "Mom, with all due respect, okay, it wasn't meant to be your only thing. What was the rest of your plan? I understand where you're coming from, but mother, it's not just me that I'm concerned about. It's not just your grandchildren. But if we don't fix Social Security, it won't be here to last out your lifetime, okay? So with all due respect, stay with us here and love your country like I know you do and your son, and let's be on the right side of things, right?" Yeah, so, you know, they have to understand the circumstance, and it's got to be relevant. This is really important. The new standard by which we communicate. It used to be that everybody watched the nightly news. You might have listened to the radio and you read your newspaper. And I'll tell you, in the morning, I go down to the gym. I work out with Paul Ryan when he's not hurting me too bad. And then I take a shower. And, you know, I put my suit on and I get to work when I'm down in D.C. But in that locker room, they have a lot of times, because it's Republicans and Democrats, whoever gets there first turns the TV on and then somebody changes it. But it's invariably, it's that Scarborough and that, was it Morning Joe or something like that? So, you know, it sets my hair on fire when I'm trying to get dressed and I'm listening to that stuff. And I'm thinking, oh my, you know, it's a completely one-sided panel, and, you know, that's the same old mantra, you know, that a conservative finally saw the light and is now enlightened because they went liberal and you know, would forsake the Constitution and their principles, and finally they get what it's like to be, I'm listening to all that stuff, and then I think to myself, oh, the good news is nobody's watching. And that's what, you know, that's what everybody in the room needs to realize, that 30%, and it's rising every single day, 30% of people now get their information from other than the traditional news outlets and sources. 30%, and going up every single day. So we have an opportunity to be in this discussion as individuals in the wider group, because people don't trust the networks. They don't trust the newspaper or the radio, but they trust their friends that they're connected with on the social media outlets. And if we don't embrace that and use that to our advantage, we will be more imperiled than we are now. But the great news is we recognize it, understand it, and we're there. And I like to, you know, we don't want to be casual observers, right, to that. I mean, I used to tell my soldiers, sometimes you could see a guy or a gal that was kind of getting tired of the grind overseas or whatever, and I'd say, hey, are you in the war or are you at the war? All right, and if you're at the war, you need to get in the war. So let's not just be casual observers to the social media. Let's get in the war and start making a difference, because this new conservative media, whether Rush started it and Glenn Beck continues it and so on, Hannity and so many other folks, the other side had a monopoly for so long, and they enjoyed that monopoly, and it was upturned. And now to the point where not only did they get mad, but they've essentially stopped reporting the news. I mean, people think that Colbert is the news, right? I mean, they think that, okay? So if we just sit and let Colbert be the news, or The Daily Show be the news, it will be the news. It is incumbent and imperative for us as Americans and as conservatives to answer back. And we need to be smart about it too, and certainly for the Republican Party, of which I'm a proud part of and hope I help to define, is to know that the president, among other things, when you look at his priorities, right after the election, he didn't call the Speaker or the leader of the Senate to talk about his agenda moving forward. I mean, I imagine they knew what it was, but you think he'd call and say, this is how we want to move America forward, even though we disagree with it. He called the leaders of the Democrat Party in the House to talk about taking the House back. And I wonder if people really know that and realize that that is his agenda. His agenda is not necessarily policy, it is politics. And he's masterful at it, and we need to learn from him. What he has done, he hasn't said, this is what I think is good for the nation, and so we're going to try and find a way to get there. He has hired behavioral psychologists to teach him how to talk to each one of us as Americans and connect with us. And so that's why he picks these words. He chooses his words very, very wisely because they make a connection with you and with everybody else. And if you ever listened, I mean, listen, he came to see us in the conference, and I'm sure you all heard about it. And he's masterful. At one point he said, listen, we can't talk about we're talking about a program, we can't talk about the cost of it right now because it's just dollars and cents. And I thought to myself, what the heck did he just say? But people seem to respond to it. What we need to recognize is what he's trying to do, how he's doing it, and listen, we want to cooperate, okay, if it's good for America, but what we don't have to do as conservatives is further the liberal agenda. We are not going to be a party to furthering the liberal agenda, and nor should we. So let's talk about a couple votes so far. The debt ceiling. And listen, as conservatives, we had an opportunity and a duty early on in the year to deal with the debt ceiling. But if you recall, the week of the debt ceiling, and this is a little bit of policy, and quite honestly, this is a little bit of politics, but it was occurring right around the time of swearing in, all right? So the conference, the House and the Senate have an opportunity to either approve a debt ceiling or not approve it and shut the government down. Now, we are 1/3 of the operation, right? They got the Senate and the executive branch, so shutting the government down is really a fight that we cannot win. We cannot win it. We do not have the bully pulpit, and as much as we like to say, look, go ahead and shut it down for a couple of days, it'll be good, it will not be good for any of us because we'll lose more on the backside of it. At the same time, for principled conservatives, how do you vote to allow the debt ceiling to go up? It's immoral to not pay your bills. It's also immoral to increase your borrowing when you have no plan to pay for it. It's immoral, in my opinion, and so you're really in a tough position. But what we said is that we have an opportunity here. If we move it down the line till about May or so and put the Senate on notice that we want them to finally produce a budget after 4 years, we can find out what their and the President's priorities are. And if I think, and like you think, if the American people find out what their priorities are, they will not agree with it. So we moved it down the line about 4 or 5 months and put the Senate on notice that they needed to produce a budget or we would not be paying them for their work. And it actually worked. And at that point, the House was it's not really offense, but it was able to be on a higher level of defense. But it's coming up again. And you need to know that, and you need to be in communication with your representatives in Congress, because the debt ceiling, President will determine when we run out of money as a nation, and so he's in the driver's seat in that regard, and we will have to either approve a debt ceiling or shut the government down. We don't want to shut it down, so what do we want for the debt ceiling to be raised? And I would say that it is immoral on either end of the equation, but if we had a plan to get to paying that debt off, that would be something that probably folks could support and would support. So for me, it will be something like a balanced budget amendment. We would like to see that. I would like to see that. So but it comes from individual members of Congress, and we have to discuss that, and we haven't figured that out yet. We had a vote on Sandy relief, the Hurricane Sandy relief, $60 billion. Here again, Republicans like me who voted against it are unfeeling and uncaring, but it couldn't be further from the truth. I have been in my life. I lived right along the Yellow Breeches, which, if you're from the area, is a fairly prolific stream right here in Cumberland County, and goes down into York County a little bit. Been flooded out on a couple occasions, and so I have lived through shoveling the mud and out of the house and all that stuff, and trying to replace and repair. And I'm not uncaring for those folks, but when we read the bill, there was no way to pay for it. Going on $17 trillion in debt. We just raised taxes. The Congress before just raised $650 billion, so this is $60 million. So right off the top, there's that year's tax increase just down the rat hole. And the worst of all is that a lot of the money wasn't even going to the afflicted area, nor was it getting there in a year. It was just a political stunt at the end of the day, meant for political purposes, and you know, what we need and what I hope you'll do is support the members that voted against that, because they will need your help for that strong stance in the future. We had the Violence Against Women Act, another unpleasant vote for those of conscience and foundation, but you know, we had the House bill, which continued to support women who were afflicted by violence and domestic violence, and funded those things, counseling and so on and so forth. And most of us in Congress get very, very close to home exactly what that means to ladies. But of course, the Senate had to load it up with all kinds of things that made this woman a little better than that woman. And again, where the president says we're all equal and we should be all treated equal under justice, this bill did not do that. Not to mention the fact that the Supreme Court previously found provisions in the same bill unconstitutional, and oh, by the way, when you show up to Congress, the first thing you do is take this oath where you raise your right hand and say you will uphold and defend. So as unpalatable as it is to vote against the Violence Against Women Act, if you're for the Constitution and if you're for equality, and if you care about the ladies in your life, you had to vote no to the Senate version and then get beat up in the newspaper. And again, I would appreciate any support for your representatives that had the courage to do that, one included. The continuing resolution. The continuing resolution locked in the sequestration numbers. We did not appreciate where the cuts were coming from any more than anybody else. It was somewhat irresponsible. It was the only thing that we could get the president to do, knowing that the debt was has been going at an unprecedented and unsustainable rate. But what he did, if you recall back in the super committee deal where the sequestration came from, is he took out 65% of the budget off the table. You can't negotiate on 65% of the budget, which only left 35% left, so that 35% was unduly hit. But we locked in the number, and we gave the agencies the ability to move their money around within, because we know it, that there's fraud, waste, and abuse in every single one, including DOD. I'm a soldier. I've been one for over 30 years, and believe me, soldiers see the waste. We know it's there. It gives the agency the opportunity to move funds where they should be. Do I think it was too much too fast? I do think it was too much too fast, but we sent the president a message. We are serious about turning this ship around. We are serious about it. So let's talk about some priorities for the Congress moving forward. I can tell you one priority that is not in the Congress. We are not going to diminish any of our rights enumerated in the Constitution. That is not on the table. All right? And let me just talk about the Second Amendment, because it's been the topic of conversation here recently, as it should be. But I don't know how you view it, but this is how I view it. It's not going to be your local law enforcement and the state police knocking on your door one day because we passed some bill in the House of Congress and the president signed it, and they come knocking on your door and they say, put all your guns in this tub, we're taking them to the car, and you can't. Oh, that's not how this is going to go. This is going to be an incremental approach where we say, well, this little part of it's bad, and we can give a little bit here and a little bit there. And just like in New York City, you're going to get a letter, one person at a time. And you're not going to, we all say, well, from my cold, dead hands, but when you're the only neighbor that they're coming for, and you're with your wife and your kids, are you really going to barricade yourself in your house and have a shootout with the police? I suggest you are not. You are going to think it's wrong. You're going to think it's going to get better. You're going to think it's, that somebody's going to make it right at some point, but your guns are going to leave your house. And it's not your freedom to hunt or collect or protect yourself from criminals that's going to be lost. It's your ability to protect yourself from your government, which at that point has already gone across the edge. We're going to try and do some regulatory overhaul. We are going to, and we have in this latest budget, repeal Obamacare. Bit by piece, piece by piece, we're going to dismantle it every chance we get. We're going to have to do postal reform, $25 million a day. Unfortunately, it's unsustainable. The Conference on Taxes is heading to a flatter, fairer system, but again, this is the Republican House. These things will not see the light of day in the Democratic Senate. And the 65% of the budget is on the table for us. Immigration reform, I think we see what's happening right now, and I think that the wholesale approach probably will not happen. We would like to make some changes individually, piece by piece, to the things that we absolutely know that are broken. And if I might add this, and with great sorrow, but one of the things that's broken is that these gentlemen that came from Chechnya a few years ago and then left the country for 6 months and then came back and nobody questioned anything, and then they blew up 100 or 200 people in Boston. That is broken. And this country and the leadership at the top better recognize the enemy and start leading it and meeting it head on. All right. So with that, Obama's #1 goal is to win back the House. And restore Representative Pelosi to the speakership. And he is doing 13 fundraisers for the Democratic House Campaign Committee in this cycle. 13 fundraisers. He just did one in Los Angeles. It's like a $3 million night for him. And so all the rest of your members of Congress have to go out and try and fight that. It is the only thing. It is the only thing stopping the Obama agenda. And if you think that he's worried about his senators and his party members in that last 2 years and what they might do and what it might do to their party post that period in a presidential election year, I hope you have seen that he has no regard not only for the country, not only for our citizens, but for his own party, his own senators, and his own representatives, and he will throw them under the bus for his agenda, and that's why you absolutely have to be engaged. You absolutely have to be. We must hold the House. And I think it's fascinating, too. You know, he reprimanded the country, and he reprimanded the country. I just found it offensive. He reprimanded his Senate, of course, not the Democrat senators, the ones that were most in peril of losing, and he said it was the gun lobby and its supporters that defeated what America wanted. Well, first of all, I don't think America wanted it. I don't believe this 92% poll. And, you know, it's okay when he forces something down our throats that we don't want, like Obamacare, but yet when the American people stand up for something that they want and don't want, like they don't want background checks and the ability to own guns and protect themselves and avail themselves to the Second Amendment, somehow we're wrong. You know, it's just an interesting juxtaposition. But we must hold the Senate, okay? We must take out those members that only made a political vote. Believe me, they wanted to vote with the party, but they made a political vote for the right reason because they knew their constituents would not withstand it. And then we must win the presidency. But I would confide in you this: that is the easy part, because once we win the presidency and have the Senate and maintain the House, our party, my party, and in this case, many of your party, has shown itself to be just as derelict and just as irresponsible as the other one, and that's when leadership is going to be most important. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you being here more than you know. I thank you for your attendance. I thank you for your patriotism, your love of country and family and community, and I wish you Godspeed. Thank you very much.